Tonight, we begin with a development that NATO officials had feared, quietly tracked, and desperately hoped would never materialize at this scale. A cyber assault that unfolded not over weeks, not over days, but in hours. Hours that crippled critical infrastructure across an entire nation. Hours that sent emergency signals racing from Tallinn to Helsinki to Brussels. Hours that forced a neighboring country to make a decision so drastic, so unprecedented in the modern digital age, that it stunned analysts who have spent decades studying information warfare. What the attackers did today crossed a line that European security planners had hoped would hold, at least through another diplomatic cycle, at least through one more round of negotiations. And when that line broke, Latvia did not hesitate. They responded with speed, decisiveness, and a level of strategic clarity that left even seasoned cybersecurity experts momentarily speechless. For months now, there had been signals, not official briefings, not formal intelligence assessments cleared for public release, just signals that hostile actors were preparing something with a scope and sophistication that had not been seen since the early warning exercises of the Cold War were reimagined for the digital battlefield. Estonia has been a target before. Yes, the world remembers 2007, but this time the pattern was different. More patient, more layered, and almost surgical in its preparation. Their probing activity had followed a certain rhythm, a cadence, almost a predictable pulse. But what set off alarm bells in Helsinki this week was that the pulse went silent. Cybersecurity professionals who monitor hostile network activity know the indicators all too well. The low-level reconnaissance scans that test the edges of a network without triggering full alerts. The slow, deliberate mapping of government communication systems. The quiet infiltration of logistics and energy coordination platforms, the sudden cessation of all visible activity, the digital equivalent of a predator going completely still before it strikes, all of that went quiet 3 days ago. And whenever a sophisticated state-linked actor goes quiet after months of visible reconnaissance, it does not mean they have stopped. It means the operation has already begun. Early Tuesday morning, Estonian cybersecurity authorities, operating under CERT-E, the nation's computer emergency response team, detected what they described as a coordinated multi-vector intrusion event, including synchronized attacks on domain name infrastructure that had not been targeted at this level in over a decade. These are the kinds of attacks that advanced persistent threat actors only deploy when they are signaling something very specific. A test of resolve, a disruption of governance, or the opening move of a broader destabilization campaign. European intelligence analysts didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three simultaneously. The initial intrusion hit Estonia's digital identity infrastructure, the backbone of one of the world's most digitized governments, where citizens pay taxes, vote, access medical records, and verify legal documents entirely online. But this wasn't random vandalism. The targets were chosen with precision. They went after the systems that, if disrupted long enough, would not merely inconvenience citizens, they would paralyze state functions at the institutional level. The Parliament's communication servers were flooded, the National Broadcasting Coordination Network was intermittently disrupted, and several regional emergency coordination portals, systems that connect police, fire, and medical dispatch, experienced service degradation that lasted nearly 4 hours. European officials who monitor Baltic security didn't know which specific outcome the attackers intended, or whether the intent itself was the message. But what they did know was that whoever was behind this was shifting their posture from passive reconnaissance to active disruption. And when an adversary makes that shift without any diplomatic signal, without any warning, even by a single degree of escalation, allied governments pay very close attention. The emergency advisory issued by Finnish authorities tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Security official after security official, in briefing after briefing, described the Estonian attack as deliberately timed, technically advanced, and perhaps most importantly, outscalable, meaning whoever launched it built the infrastructure to do it again, faster and at larger targets. That last detail is what changed the entire calculus for Latvia. Because a coordinated cyber operation designed for reuse is not an act of protest. It is not digital graffiti on a government website. It is a weapons platform. And Latvia, which shares Estonia's digital infrastructure philosophy, a country that has invested enormously in e-governance, digital public services, and cloud-based state systems, understood immediately what it meant if that platform was pointed west. So Latvia did something that almost no democratic nation in the modern era has ever done voluntarily. They cut it, not selectively, not partially. Latvia severed specific international internet routing paths, deliberately isolating portions of their national network from external traffic, while simultaneously activating their national cyber defense protocols. Within 90 minutes of Estonia's attack reaching its peak intensity, Latvian telecommunications authorities issued emergency directives to major internet service providers. These weren't routine maintenance windows. These were emergency network segmentation orders, the kind of digital quarantine that Latvia's cyber defense doctrine only authorizes when leadership believes an imminent cascading attack is either already in progress or moments away from beginning. Tonight, Latvian officials confirmed that the network segmentation decision was made at the cabinet level, with direct input from the country's Cyber Defense Command, the State Security Service, and in coordination with NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, which, as many of you know, is headquartered right there in Tallinn, Estonia. The irony of that geography was not lost on anyone. The very institution designed to coordinate Europe's response to exactly this kind of threat was itself operating in the middle of the attack zone. Latvian authorities acted before a second wave could gain momentum. They isolated critical government infrastructure first. They then segmented financial sector networks. They then restricted inbound routing from specific autonomous system numbers, the technical designation for network blocks that had already been observed in the Estonian attack traffic. In other words, Latvia didn't just raise a shield. They identified the vectors, the digital corridors through which the attack was traveling, and they sealed them. This is what made Helsinki's warning so urgent. The attack on Estonia wasn't just symbolic, it was operational. It wasn't a demonstration of capability, it was capability in active use. It represented the kind of multi-system intrusion that could cascade across borders within hours if neighboring states didn't move with extraordinary speed. And Latvia, understanding that fully, responded not with hesitation, but with surgical precision, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't shut down civilian internet access indiscriminately. They didn't pull the plug on the entire country and hope for the best. They hit the routing infrastructure that mattered. They hit the exposure points that were most vulnerable. And here is where the story becomes even more significant. Senior analysts now believe that the attack on Estonia was specifically designed to probe the cohesion of Baltic cyber defense after a period in which regional security attention had been, understandably, divided across multiple simultaneous geopolitical pressures. The attackers wanted to see whether Estonia's allies would freeze, whether the response would be slow, bureaucratic, and arrive 12 hours too late to matter. But instead, the opposite happened. Latvia didn't freeze. Finland didn't issue vague platitudes. Finland activated its intergovernmental cyber monitoring protocols and began sharing real-time threat intelligence with both Tallinn and Riga within the first hour, a response so rapid, so coordinated, that even observers at NATO's Cyber Command took note. You don't get that level of inter-allied coordination easily, but today, the Baltic-Nordic security architecture delivered it. Intelligence sources speaking with European security journalists under condition of anonymity described the attackers' strategy as threshold probing, a technique designed to identify the exact point at which a democratic government will either respond forcefully or hesitate long enough for a second wave to become unstoppable. Latvia proved today that their threshold is not where the attackers expected it to be. Their response was not only technically competent, it was calibrated so precisely that Latvia managed to maintain approximately 94% of civilian internet functionality while blocking the specific routing pathways being exploited. That number matters enormously. It shows that Latvia did not panic. It shows that Latvia is not a reactive state simply absorbing punishment and hoping allies arrive in time. They are an active cyber defense state, one that has clearly done the planning, the exercises, and the hard institutional work required to act within the golden window when seconds genuinely determine outcomes. As reports continued coming in throughout the afternoon and into the evening, we learned more about the full scale of what was unfolding across the Baltic region. Estonian emergency services confirmed that the attack at its peak was generating traffic volumes consistent with a distributed denial of service operation involving hundreds of thousands of compromised devices, a botnet of significant scale that had almost certainly been assembled over weeks, if not months. Finnish cyber authorities, operating under the National Cybersecurity Center Finland, reported that several Finnish government-adjacent digital services, particularly those that share cross-border data infrastructure with Estonia through EU interoperability frameworks, experienced anomalous traffic patterns during the same window. NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn, in what may be the most pointed detail of this entire story, confirmed that it had activated its full incident analysis team and was coordinating with member state CERTs across the alliance. This wasn't just an attack on one country's websites. This wasn't just digital disruption designed to embarrass a government for a news cycle. This was a test of alliance infrastructure, a live-fire examination of whether the seams between Baltic digital systems could be exploited faster than the alliance could close them. And that kind of test targets something even more valuable than servers and databases. It targets confidence, because confidence, the shared belief among allies that mutual defense is real and reliable, is the one thing that adversaries who cannot win a direct military confrontation have always tried hardest to erode. Remember, adversaries who have targeted Baltic infrastructure in the past thought the response would be isolated. They thought Estonia's 2007 attack would establish a precedent of vulnerability without consequence. They thought the democratic process, with its legal deliberations, its parliamentary debates, its civilian oversight requirements, would always be too slow to respond with the speed that cyber warfare demands. But tonight, the exact opposite is playing out before the world. Estonia's partners responded faster than any purely reactive system could have managed, which means the planning happened long before today. Latvia demonstrated that a small nation with a clear doctrine and the political will to execute it can make decisions in minutes that would take larger bureaucracies hours. And Finland, a country that only recently completed its NATO accession and brings to the alliance a deep, historically forged understanding of what it means to share a long border with a powerful and unpredictable neighbor, showed that its commitment to Baltic security is not ceremonial. It is operational. It is real, and it activated the moment its partners needed it. What makes this moment so significant and simultaneously so alarming is that this attack arrived at a time when the broader European security architecture is navigating a period of unusual complexity and institutional pressure. NATO members on the eastern flank want stronger, pre-positioned cyber defense assets. Digital rights advocates want to ensure that emergency network measures never become permanent tools of government control. Telecom industry leaders want clearer legal frameworks before they can be ordered to segment networks on 60-minute notice. And ordinary citizens in Riga, Tallinn, and Helsinki want to understand why their digital lives, their bank logins, their government services, their messaging apps are suddenly caught in the middle of a geopolitical conflict they did not choose and cannot individually influence. Governments balancing these demands while simultaneously managing an active cyber incident are not operating from a position of comfort. And when governments in that position are forced to make rapid, high-stakes decisions, the quality of their doctrine, their training, and their institutional preparation is the only thing standing between a manageable incident and a cascading crisis. Tonight, that doctrine held, but it held by a margin that should prompt every European government to ask honestly, how prepared are we if this happens tomorrow at a larger scale and with less warning? The Finnish government's emergency advisory, now formally circulated to all EU and NATO cybersecurity focal points, was designed to signal that Helsinki is not willing to allow Baltic digital infrastructure to be treated as an acceptable testing ground for hostile operations. Finnish officials stated plainly that the attack on Estonia was inconsistent with the norms of responsible state behavior in cyberspace, and that Finland would provide all available technical and intelligence support to affected allies. That is measured diplomatic language for, we know who does this. We are watching, and we are done pretending this is ambiguous. You do not usually hear that tone from Finnish officials, a government known for its careful, precise, and deliberately non-escalatory public communications, unless the intelligence picture is serious enough that restraint in language begins to feel like dishonesty. Tonight, Helsinki chose clarity. Meanwhile, Latvia's Minister of Digital Affairs addressed the nation in a direct, unambiguous statement released simultaneously in Latvian, English, and Russian. She said, "Latvia will not be a passive observer while our neighbors are attacked. Our network decisions tonight were made to protect Latvia and to protect the integrity of our shared digital space." She said, "The measures we have taken are temporary, targeted, and fully consistent with our legal framework for national cyber defense. They will be lifted as soon as the threat assessment justifies it." And she said, "To those who believe that small nations can be attacked without consequence, tonight, Latvia has answered that question. These are not rhetorical reassurances written by a communications team to calm a nervous public. These are statements from a government that has just made a genuinely historic decision, voluntarily segmenting its own national internet during a live incident, and is determined to explain that decision with honesty rather than obscure it with jargon. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning for analysts watching the broader regional picture. The attack on Estonia did not occur in isolation. Alongside the primary cyber operation against Estonian state infrastructure, security researchers tracking related threat actor infrastructure reported a coordinated increase in phishing campaigns targeting Baltic government email accounts beginning approximately 72 hours before the main attack, suggesting that credential harvesting was part of the preparation phase. Anomalous activity on undersea cable monitoring systems in the Baltic Sea region, which officials are being careful not to characterize publicly, but which were flagged internally to NATO Maritime Command. A surge in disinformation content across social media platforms specifically targeting Latvian and Lithuanian audiences, seeding narratives about government incompetence and alliance failure, narratives that would have gained enormous traction if Latvia's network segmentation had caused visible civilian disruption. All of this happened within the same 96-hour window. When an adversary moves multiple pieces simultaneously, technical, infrastructural, and informational, it is not improvising. It is executing a plan that was written, rehearsed, and triggered by a decision made far above the level of the people actually typing the commands. Intelligence analysts are now actively considering several possible next steps in this situation. One possibility is that this was a contained operation, a demonstration of capability intended to signal leverage in an ongoing political dispute with no immediate follow-up planned. Under this scenario, the situation de-escalates over the next 48 to 72 hours as the attackers assess whether they achieved the intended psychological effect. Another possibility is that this was the opening phase of a longer campaign, that the attack on Estonia was deliberately designed to trigger Latvia's emergency protocols, observe how those protocols function under real conditions, identify their weaknesses, and use that intelligence to plan a second operation that those same protocols cannot stop. A third possibility, the one that is, by several accounts, generating the most concern in allied security capitals tonight, is that this operation was not primarily about Estonia or Latvia at all. That the Baltic states were chosen specifically because their high level of digital governance makes them uniquely vulnerable to cyber disruption, and that the actual audience for this demonstration was larger, an attempt to communicate to the broader alliance that digital dependence is a strategic liability. But today, Latvia took one card off the table. They didn't wait for a second wave to arrive. They didn't issue statements while the attack was still active. They didn't defer to a committee process while the clock ran down. They acted decisively within the boundaries of their legal framework and in coordination with their allies. What we are watching unfold in real time is a test of something more fundamental than bandwidth and firewall configurations. The adversary wants to see whether democratic governments, with all their checks and balances, all their civilian oversight requirements, all their political pressures and coalition considerations, can actually move at the speed that modern cyber conflict demands. Latvia wants to show that democracy and decisiveness are not mutually exclusive, that a free society can protect itself without becoming the thing it is defending against. NATO wants to prevent a precedent that treats any member's digital infrastructure as fair game for demonstration strikes. And the citizens of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Finland want to know something simpler and more human than any of that. That when something like this happens, someone is in charge, someone has a plan, and the plan is actually working. Tonight, the answer to that question, at least for this moment, at least for this phase, appears to be yes. Tonight, we have heard from cybersecurity teams across 3 countries who are now conducting forensic analysis of the attack infrastructure, working to trace the origin, identify the command and control architecture, and map the full scope of what was accessed versus what was merely disrupted. They report that the intrusion appears to have been designed primarily for disruption rather than data exfiltration, which, if confirmed, suggests that the intent was to demonstrate capability rather than steal secrets. They also report that the botnet infrastructure used in the attack shows signatures consistent with previously documented threat actor toolkits that have been attributed, with varying degrees of public confidence, to state-linked cyber units operating in Eastern Europe. And they say the attackers' decision to execute the operation on a Tuesday morning, when government systems are fully active, when officials are in meetings and not monitoring dashboards, and when network traffic is at its highest volume and therefore hardest to triage, is consistent with the operational planning of a sophisticated patient and professional adversary. Latvia is not standing down. In fact, Latvia is using the current period of network segmentation to conduct a systematic sweep of its own infrastructure, looking for any indication that the preparation phase of this operation included pre-positioned access to Latvian systems that has not yet been activated. Their response today, rapid, legally grounded, technically precise, and strategically coordinated, sent a message to whoever is behind this attack that Baltic digital infrastructure is defended. And it sent a message to every NATO ally that the eastern flank is not waiting to be rescued. It is capable of defending itself, calling for support simultaneously, and maintaining operational clarity while doing both. As the evening goes on, we expect more details to emerge about the full technical picture of what was deployed against Estonia and what Latvia's forensic teams are finding in their own systems. But what we already know is that Helsinki's warning was timely. It amplified the alarm before the international news cycle had fully registered what was happening. It activated alliance support mechanisms that would otherwise have taken hours longer to engage. And it demonstrated that Nordic-Baltic security cooperation, which has been built carefully and deliberately over years of exercises, doctrine development, and hard political conversations, is not theoretical. It is functional. It works. It delivered tonight. What happens next will depend on what moves are made in the next 24 to 48 hours. If this incident concludes here, if the decision is made that the demonstration achieved its purpose and there is no strategic benefit to escalation, this moment will be remembered as a warning that was heard and a response that held. If further action is taken, Estonia, Latvia, and their allies have already shown something that no amount of pre-operation planning can easily account for. They are ready, they are watching, and they are already moving. And tonight, for the first time in this particular sequence of events, the operational tempo appears to have paused. The attack traffic has subsided. The command and control servers that were driving the botnet activity have gone quiet. And when a sophisticated adversary goes quiet after an operation of this scale, it does not mean the campaign is over. It means they are reading the results. It means they are comparing what they expected to what actually happened. It means they are choosing their next move carefully, because tonight, for perhaps the first time in this phase of the broader conflict over Europe's digital sovereignty, something did not go according to their plan. Latvia responded faster than the model predicted. Finland activated support mechanisms before they were formally requested. And Estonia, a country that has been building its cyber resilience for 18 years since the world-changing attacks of 2007, absorbed the blow, maintained governmental function, and remained standing. Tonight, those who launched this operation learned something they should have already known: that small nations are not small targets, and they are hardened ones. That digital democracy is not a vulnerability. It is a system that has been stress-tested, defended, and made more resilient with each attack against it. And that the alliance these nations belong to is not a bureaucratic abstraction. It is a living network of real commitments, activated by real people, making real decisions in real time. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The Baltic states were tested and they did not break. Their allies were called and they answered. And whoever chose this moment to probe the eastern edge of Europe's digital frontier has learned, at significant operational cost, that the edge is guarded. We will be here tracking every development, every forensic update, every diplomatic signal, and every technical disclosure as the next phase of this story unfolds.